I brought a launch commit. Not a launch vehicle, thankfully. We would lose the room deposit. The warning transition is an engine controller disagreement late in the count. One channel says the commanded valve position and measured response have diverged beyond tolerance. At that point, the system has not proved an explosion is coming. It has proved that the evidence supporting permission to continue no longer exists. So the first transition is abort. Close propellant paths, safe ignition energy, stop the sequencer, preserve the telemetry. But I want to be precise before we turn it into a clean diagram. An abort is itself a maneuver. Valves move. Pressure transients travel. A launch mount full of energetic fluids does not become harmless because a state machine prints abort in capital letters.
Good. The warning revokes a capability, not reality. Which capability?
Proceeding toward ignition, possibly maintaining some valves in their current configuration too, depending on where the disagreement arose. That is the annoying answer. The safe response is phase dependent. If you close everything instantly, you may trap pressure where the vehicle was relying on flow. If you keep everything still, you may keep feeding a leak. The warning needs enough context to select a stopping trajectory, not merely a stopped state.
And the warning itself came from what? Two sensors disagreeing, a predicted response missing, a checksum failure.
Let us say the commanded oxidizer pre-valve movement should produce a pressure signature within a bounded interval. Position telemetry claims movement. Downstream pressure does not agree. It could be a stuck valve, a bad position sensor, a timing fault, or an unexpected physical restriction. We do not know which. The system knows the evidence bundle required for the next irreversible action is incomplete.
That already gives us two records. One is the physical observation bundle. The other is the authorization derived from it. If we store only lunch aborted, the later repair team will reconstruct causality from a label that never contained it.
And if we store only raw telemetry, somebody will rerun 1,000 channels and accidentally infer the old authorization. So persist both observations as observations and the specific lease that was revoked. I would make permission to advance an expiring capability token bound to vehicle, configuration, count phase, software versions, and the evidence snapshot that earned it.
You are going to put a cryptographic lease on a rocket before coffee.
A rocket is exactly where I want fewer vibes in the permission path.
I agree with the shape, but the biological system version is going to make your lease uncomfortable. My warning transition is from a fermentation run. Imagine a bioreactor producing a food protein. Dissolved oxygen begins drifting downward while agitation demand rises. That pattern may indicate contamination, a metabolic shift in the intended organism, sensor fouling, feed imbalance, or a mechanical transfer problem. The immediate action is not necessarily kill the batch. It is stop the transition that would make the uncertainty expensive, suspend the next nutrient feed escalation, isolate the vessel from downstream harvest, take orthogonal samples, and preserve enough living material to diagnose. The batch keeps metabolizing while your transaction coordinator thinks.
All transactions have a physical world somewhere underneath them. Databases merely arrange for most programmers not to notice.
Yes, but living systems punish the fantasy especially quickly. There is no rollback to the culture at 0917. Sampling changes volume, pausing feed changes metabolism, cooling changes expression. Even the act of waiting is an intervention. So when we say abort, we need to distinguish revoking the planned commitment from attempting to restore a prior physical state. The first is often possible, the second may be nonsense.
That is true for launch too. Once tanks are loaded and chilled, an abort does not return you to the morning. Hardware has accumulated thermal cycles. Seals have lived through pressure. Weather has moved. Crew fatigue has changed. We can safe the vehicle, but we cannot unhappen the attempt.
Then rollback is the wrong universal verb. We have compensation, containment, and history. Some logical effects can roll back. Some physical effects require compensating operations. Some facts must persist forever because they determine whether the next authorization is valid.
That is the classic trouble with pretending atomicity means time reversal. A transaction can make partial work invisible and release resources, but the world may have received a message, moved a package, heated a tank, or taught a person something. the durable system records enough to reconcile those effects. My warning comes from a distributed database failover. The primary stops responding after accepting a commit request. The client sees a timeout. A replica is promoted. The dangerous question is whether the transaction committed before the failure, if the new primary guesses, it can duplicate an external effect or erase an acknowledged fact. The warning transition is not merely node unavailable. It is outcome unknown.
Unknown to whom?
Exactly. Perhaps the old primary wrote the log record and the replica received it, but the client did not receive the acknowledgement. Perhaps the record was only in volatile memory. Perhaps a downstream service acted on a message whose local transaction later vanished. Unknown is relational. Each participant has a different evidence frontier.
And what does abort mean if it may already have committed?
It means stop issuing dependent effects until the outcome is resolved. Do not translate timeout into failure. Fence the old primary so it cannot resume authority. Establish a single surviving history. Then classify every effect. Committed and durable, uncommitted and discarded, externally visible and needing reconciliation, or genuinely indeterminate and therefore barred from automatic replay.
My example is a validator about to vote on a new fork after restart. It has a local ledger, a remembered last vote, and network reports that may be stale or adversarial. The warning is that its tower state and the cluster view do not establish a safe next vote. If it signs on contradictory histories, the penalty is not just local corruption, it can help violate consensus and get slashed. Abort means revoke signing capability immediately while retaining observation and repair capabilities. The process can fetch blocks, compare routes, replay, and ask peers questions. It just cannot sign because unknown cannot inherit green.
You knew I would object to that sentence.
I was counting on it.
Unknown cannot inherit a specific permission whose evidence is missing. Fine. But if you generalize that to unknown means inert, you can create the hazard. Your validator may need to send repair requests. My vehicle may need to vent. David's culture may need continued agitation. Jim's cluster may need a leader to preserve availability. We learned this already. Revocation has a scope.
Yes, signing goes red, observing stays green, repair traffic may go amber with rate and destination constraints. The mistake would be representing the whole component as healthy or unhealthy. Capability-specific state.
There is another mistake, assuming the categories are independent. In the bioreactor, continued agitation is both containment and evidence generation. If I stop it, I may protect against aerosolization in one failure mode and destroy diagnostic clarity in another. The intervention changes which hypotheses remain distinguishable.
Then our model needs an epistemic ledger alongside the operational one. Not only what effect occurred, but which future questions that effect made answerable or unanswerable.
I like that, although no flight operator will thank us for naming it an epistemic ledger. Call it evidence preservation. When the abort trips, freeze the circular buffers, preserve high-rate data from before the threshold crossing, record clock quality, record which channels were considered valid at the time, not which ones an analyst later prefers. Capture command issue time, actuator acknowledgement, observed response, and the rule version that declared disagreement.
Also persist the absence. If a sensor missed its deadline, do not replace missing with 0 or last known good. Missing is a first-class observation.
That is painfully important in biology. A sample not taken is not a negative result. A plate unreadable because the control failed is not no contamination. Yet dashboards collapse both into blank space, and blank space becomes normal when people are tired.
Databases do this culturally even when they do not do it technically. Null acquires whatever meaning the next query author needs. We should make unknown typed, not observed, observation invalid, result pending, result irretrievably lost, or conflict among valid observers.
Now walk my launch case. Warning fires at T minus 40 seconds. What must persist?
the raw observations and their provenance, the command history, clock synchronization confidence, the controller and rule versions, the configuration identity of the actual vehicle, not the intended configuration, the exact authorization that existed, and the transition that revoked it. Any physical actions initiated before and during abort, operator acknowledgments, external notices already emitted, and evidence gaps.
Environmental state 2, temperature, wind, ground support conditions, propellant properties insofar as measured. Otherwise, the repair team may attribute a context-sensitive response to the component alone.
Persist the dependency closure, or at least a hash address manifest of it. If launch eligibility depended on 12 signed checks, the record should identify those exact checks, not 12 booleans copied into a new row. Otherwise, a later database repair can make the past look green under new data.
What rolls back?
Tentative software reservations, range slots if the range accepts cancellation, queued, downstream announcements not yet published, commands staged but not issued, temporary resource claims, anything whose contract explicitly supports reversal and whose reversal is itself logged.
The last clause matters. A canceled command cannot simply disappear from the audit trail. Operationally, it rolls back. Historically, it persists as attempted and canceled.
And physical commands already accepted do not roll back. They get compensation. Close after open is not erase open. Vent after pressurize is not unpressurize in the historical sense.
What requires new authorization?
Anything that restores the path toward ignition. Not only the final launch command. Re-entering terminal count, rearming ignition, reopening a valve whose safing action closed it, relying again on suspect sensor or substituting a different sensor set. Repair may restore eligibility to request those actions. It does not issue them.
There, repair, eligibility restoration, fresh commit are separate transitions. People collapse the last two because the green light is seductive.
Let us name the states without pretending. There is one global state. There is a fault hypothesis state, a physical configuration state, an evidence completeness state, and an authorization state. Repair can change physical configuration and produce evidence. A review can update the fault hypothesis. Eligibility is a predicate over all of them plus current context. Commit is a new decision made after that predicate passes.
And eligibility expires. My clean assay at noon does not authorize harvest tomorrow if the culture has spent 24 more hours evolving. Gwynne's repaired valve does not carry yesterday's weather clearance. Jim's reconciled transaction does not make a cached client intent current. Toly's replayed validator state does not make an old vote request safe.
Good. Now the crash points. The warning is detected, but the controller crashes before writing the abort record.
Capabilities should fail closed at the actuator boundary. The signing key, ignition enable, or feed escalation permission must require a currently valid lease. If the controller disappears, the lease expires or a watchdog revokes it. Otherwise, the database record is theater.
Careful with expires. 40 seconds can contain a lifetime. Waiting for lease expiry may be too slow.
Then detection must atomically trip a lower level interlock or de-energize the permission line before attempting durable explanation. Fast safety path, slower forensic path.
Not atomically in the metaphysical sense, ordered so that permission revocation is the first durable or physically latched effect. The record can later say the explanation was incomplete, but the actuator must be able to prove it no longer had authority.
Suppose the warning itself is false, and that fast trip kills the batch.
Then the abort policy was badly scoped or the economics accepted that loss. You cannot make a detector both fallible and consequence-free.
I agree, but that is where people hide moral choices inside technical language. If a false positive discards 6 months of scarce patient drive material, the threshold is not just an engineering constant. The design should expose who authorized that asymmetry and what alternatives were considered.
Yes. Safety decisions allocate risk. A launch scrub costs money and schedule. A missed abort may cost lives. we can be rigorous without pretending the weighting emerged from the sensor.
So persist policy provenance too. Who or what had authority to define the trip rule, which hazards it prioritized, and when that authorization expires. Otherwise, fresh evidence is evaluated under immortal policy.
All right, crash point 2, revocation latch, some safing commands issued, then power loss. On restart, do not rerun the entire abort script blindly. Each step needs an idempotency key or a state-sensitive reconciliation rule.
And some commands are not idempotent. Fire pyrotechnic valve twice is meaningless at best. Cycle a valve twice may damage it. The restart logic must inspect achieved physical state, not merely replay intent.
This is the distinction between exactly ONT's fantasy and effectively ONT's design. Assign a durable operation identity, record intent before execution, where possible, record observed outcome afterward, and on recovery, reconcile the uncertain interval. If the device can report a monotonic actuation counter or irreversible state, use it. If not, mark the effect indeterminate and require a human or an independent test.
In the reactor, sample collection is like that. The robot logs intent to draw 20 milliliters and crashes after opening a path. On recovery, the vial may contain 12 milliliters, the vessel may have lost 18, and neither number is guaranteed. Repeating the draw gives you a new sample at a new biological time, not completion of the old operation.
So the operation identity must not swallow semantic time. Retry is a new physical event, even if it serves the same diagnostic goal.
Yes, the original sample may be compromised, but still informative. Preserve it with its uncertainty. Do not relabel the retry as sample 1 and quietly repair the spreadsheet.
Crash point 3, safing completes, repair begins, and the repair system crashes after changing hardware, but before recording the change.
Then configuration identity cannot be derived solely from the repair database. The hardware needs observable identity, serialized parts, tamper-evident work steps, measured configuration, photographs where useful, independent inspection. The system resumes from the world, not from its last sentence about the world.
This is where deterministic replay hits a wall. Replay can reconstruct what the software believed it requested. It cannot prove a technician torqued a fitting. You need external attestations tied to the physical object.
An independent does not always mean a second person standing there. It can be an instrument with a different failure mode, a leak check, a witness torque trace, a functional response. Independence is about correlated error, not head count.
Same in the lab. Repeating the same assay on the same fouled sensor is not orthogonal evidence. A microscopy check, sequencing result, metabolite profile, and mechanical inspection each cut the hypothesis space differently. Repair is not replace the part you first blamed. Repair is produce a state whose eligibility case survives plausible alternative causes.
You are asking for a proof obligation.
A bounded one. If we demand proof against every imaginable cause, nothing living ever moves. Name the decision, name the consequence of being wrong, identify the live hypotheses that could reverse it, and buy enough independent evidence to reduce those risks below an explicitly accepted threshold.
Who accepts?
The owner of the consequence cannot always be present, so authority has to be delegated ahead of time with bounds, but the delegation should not be laundered into machine certainty. A system can say eligible under policy P, not safe in the voice of the universe.
That is how flight readiness works, when it works well. Discipline chiefs sign their domains. The launch director integrates them. No one possesses total knowledge, but responsibilities and descent paths are explicit. A warning may invalidate one sign-off, which invalidates the integrated commit. Repair renews the domain evidence. Then everyone whose basis materially changed must recommit.
Must everyone recommit? Suppose the valve repair cannot affect range safety software.
Not everyone. That would turn safety into ritual and train people to click through. We need an impact graph. The repair invalidates claims dependent on the changed component, environment, procedure, or elapsed time. Unaffected attestations may remain valid if their leases have not expired.
Excellent. Fresh commit does not mean global amnesia. It means no stale intention crosses a revocation boundary. The human does not have to redo irrelevant work, but the command to proceed must be newly issued against the current eligibility bundle.
I want to slow down on stale intention. Yesterday, or actual yesterday, not some fabricated history, we each had rooms in which the board sometimes mattered less than the company. That does not authorize me to claim we four reached any shared conclusion then, but it does affect how I enter this room. I know privately and unevenly that an encounter can produce evidence that is not reducible to the planned artifact. Does our system preserve that kind of remainder, or does it force every effect into persist, roll back, authorize?
It should preserve the seam between record and experience. A ledger can establish that a room occurred, who attended, what was explicitly committed, perhaps what was said. It cannot become the sole owner of what the encounter meant. Felt consequence may persist without acquiring transactional authority.
Meaning can persist in your local state. It just cannot silently grant capabilities to me.
That sounded severe, but I think it is kind.
It is intended kindly. If you leave moved, I do not want a schema rejecting your feeling because it lacks quorum. I also do not want your feeling issuing a credential in my name.
That is the human analog of eligibility versus commit. Trust can be present evidence. It may change what I am willing to consider, but consent to one trajectory does not survive and abort as a held open command. If circumstances trip the boundary, restoration of comfort is not permission to resume. Ask again.
And asking again should not pretend the prior attempt never happened. Freshness is not innocence. The new request carries the durable history, the warning, the abort, the costs, the repair, and the fact that someone once said yes under different conditions.
There is a danger there too. Durable history can become a sentence. A batch with one contamination alert becomes permanently suspect. A vehicle with one valve anomaly becomes the cursed tail number. A person who revoked consent once gets treated as unreliable forever. What persists should inform the next authorization without predetermining it.
So store events, not superstition scores.
Or if you compute a score, make its derivation inspectable, contestable, and scoped. Databases love summaries because queries are cheaper. Institutions love them because judgment is expensive. Then the summary becomes fate.
Operational teams do this with hardware. One anomaly can produce useful caution or folklore. The antidote is not forgetting. It is disciplined closure, what failed, what evidence supports that conclusion, what corrective action changed, what residual uncertainty remains, and what would falsify the closure. If the cause remains unknown, say unknown. Do not invent a loose connector because the schedule needs a noun.
That sentence belongs over every agricultural incident report. A crop trial fails and everyone wants a cause, heat, pathogen, operator, genetics. Often the experiment identifies a set of compatible stories, not one story. Repair under causal uncertainty may still be rational if it addresses several stories or cheaply tests among them. But eligibility should carry the ambiguity forward.
Does ambiguity ever expire?
Evidence can make it irrelevant to a decision without resolving it. Suppose we never learn why dissolved oxygen drifted, but after replacing the probe, cleaning the gas path, reseeding from a verified bank, and running a bounded challenge, all release criteria pass with independent confirmation. The original cause remains unknown. The new batch may still become eligible because the decision no longer depends on identifying it.
That is a useful distinction. Close the incident versus close the causal question. Systems often falsify one to achieve the other.
Flight does that. We can retire the suspect hardware, alter inspection, and demonstrate the new configuration without proving the microscopic origin of the old anomaly. But the unresolved cause remains discoverable because it may matter when another system produces a similar signature.
So repair can route around an unknown. Eligibility restoration must show that the unknown no longer controls the requested capability, not that the universe surrendered an explanation.
Yes.
That may be the cleanest sentence we have produced.
Do not make it a plaque. Plaques are where conditional claims go to become religion.
Put an expiration timestamp on the plaque.
And a schema version.
And assay control.
Crash point 4, repair evidence is complete and eligibility is restored, but the system crashes before the operator's fresh commit.
Then nothing proceeds. Eligibility is not intention. On restart, eligibility may still be valid if its evidence, leases, and context remain valid, but the commit is absent.
We need to be exact about an operator clicking launch at the same moment as the crash. That creates another unknown outcome. The commit request needs a unique identity and a durable acceptance point. After restart, the system reports accepted, rejected, or unresolved. It does not infer intent from the presence of eligibility.
For a launch command, unresolved may itself require remaining safe and asking again after proving no initiation occurred. You cannot duplicate it merely because the operator says, "I clicked."
Nor can you insist the operator repeat the click without telling them whether the first may have taken effect. Fresh authorization requires an honest account of current uncertainty. Otherwise, the second consent is manufactured by a misleading interface.
User interfaces are part of the protocol. If the button animation says canceled before the actuator confirms revocation, that is a protocol bug.
Yes, the displayed state is an externally visible effect. It must be reconciled too. Many distributed failures become human failures because the machine presents certainty it does not possess, and the human compensates based on fiction.
A countdown display is especially dangerous that way. The numbers imply a single authoritative clock. In reality, there are clocks, holds, sequencers, and physical processes. When authority fragments, the display should show hold and the reason it cannot claim more, not keep counting because the animation thread is alive.
In a lab, the equivalent is the green release banner computed from yesterday's results. While a new sample is pending, the screen is technically displaying the last completed evaluation. The operator reads it as current permission. State needs temporal grammar, was eligible, is under reevaluation, eligibility revoked, eligible to request release.
And never ready when you mean no non-blocker. Those are different claims.
We have accumulated a model. Shall we try to break it with simultaneous faults?
Please.
The launch controller detects the pressure mismatch. It trips the interlock. The telemetry archive is partitioned. A technician sees the local warning and begins the approved safing procedure. Meanwhile, the central sequencer, missing the warning, continues issuing commands. What prevents split brain actuation?
Authority must be fenced at the actuator or lower common layer, not merely coordinated among controllers. The local trip increments an epoch or physically removes the enable. Commands from the central sequencer carry the old epoch and are rejected. If the actuator cannot enforce epochs, use an independent hardwired inhibit for the hazardous capability.
And the safing commands need a path that remains available after the inhibit. Otherwise, the same fence blocks venting. Again, capability specific. The architecture should make it impossible for a generic command channel to smuggle ignition authority while preserving narrowly constrained emergency actions.
Now corrupt the warning sensor at the same time as the archive partition. The local system trips on bad data, central sees nominal data, and neither can prove superiority.
The trip remains. For catastrophic capabilities, credible disagreement is enough to revoke. Restoration waits for independent evidence that causes false scrubs. I accept them within the policy bounds.
There is your exception to green under incomplete history.
No. It is exactly scoped. The vehicle remains authorized to vent, communicate, diagnose, and perhaps recycle parts of the count. It is not authorized to ignite. I object when your slogan swallows the system.
Fair, the slogan loses again to the capability matrix.
Now, the uncomfortable availability question. If every disagreement fences the primary, an attacker can keep the system permanently unavailable.
Then the repair and reconfiguration path must tolerate Byzantine noise without weakening the commit rule. You can change membership, rotate keys, isolate bad sensors, or form a new quorum under a separately authorized emergency procedure. You do not solve denial of service by letting ambiguous nodes sign.
But emergency procedure can become a bypass that operators normalize under pressure.
Which is why its use must be conspicuous, bounded and more work than normal operation without being impossible. Different key, limited capability, short lease, mandatory post-event review, and no quiet conversion into the standard path.
Also tested. An emergency authorization that exists only in a binder is not a capability. It is literature.
And a bypass tested weekly may become the primary system wearing an emergency hat.
So frequency itself is a warning transition. If exceptional authorization exceeds a threshold, revoke the assumption that the normal architecture is normal.
That is good. System signal failure, not only through bad outcomes, but through increasing dependence on recovery mechanisms. If you are constantly recycling the count and succeeding, you may tell yourself the recycling works. The real observation is that your nominal process no longer reaches commit cleanly.
Retries high degradation. A database with automatic failover can look perfectly available while consuming redundancy. The first replica fails, traffic shifts, dashboards remain green, and the organization congratulates itself. But eligibility for the next failure has changed. Resilience was spent.
Biology calls this reserve. A plant under chronic stress may maintain yield until a second stress arrives. The visible output persists while adaptive capacity is depleted. We need to persist not only effects and authorization, but remaining margin.
Margin is hard to measure and easy to fake.
Then expose it as a model, not a fact. Confidence intervals, assumptions, leading indicators. Refusing to represent uncertain reserve does not preserve rigor. It privileges the measurable output until collapse.
Agreed.
Rockets have margins everywhere, and some are analytical. The honest artifact says what was measured, what was inferred, and how much uncertainty the inference carries. Then the authorization policy decides what margin is required.
This brings us back to Slack. Unused capacity appears wasteful because its successful effect is a counterfactual. The outage that did not propagate, the abort that remained orderly, the team that still had attention for anomaly resolution. A system should not roll Slack back merely because the nominal transaction succeeded.
You cannot persist Slack as an event.
No, but you can preserve the conditions that produce it. Spare replicas, time buffers, unallocated power, staffing overlap, reversible decision windows. And after an incident, record which reserves were consumed. Otherwise, the next fresh commit assumes a capacity that no longer exists.
There is human reserve too. If the same operator has been through 3 abort cycles, a fresh click is syntactically fresh, but may not be an adequately renewed authorization. Fatigue changes eligibility.
Absolutely. Shift limits, handovers, independent polls, and the right to call a hold are system properties, not wellness decorations. The person is part of the control loop and also a person, which means we should not model them only as a flaky component.
What is the difference operationally?
A component gets replaced when its error rate rises. A person gets information, relief, context, the ability to dissent, and protection from incentives that punish stopping. You design for their judgment, not merely around their failure.
And their authorization is not a token the institution owns. Delegation has limits. An operator may be empowered to commit, but cannot be compelled to certify evidence they do not believe.
This is where the room has drifted into governance, which I think means the original problem was governance all along.
Most state machines are governance with worse typography.
And most governance would improve if someone had to specify its state transitions.
Let us give the room one shared transition sequence then. Warning, evidence supporting capability C becomes invalid, contradictory, stale, or insufficient. Abort, revoke C first, initiate scoped containment, and preserve evidence. Repair, change the physical, logical, or organizational conditions while recording irreversible effects and uncertainty. Eligibility restoration. Independently establish that current conditions satisfy a named current policy for requesting C. Fresh commit. An authorized actor issues a new, uniquely identified intention against that current eligibility. Does anyone object?
I would add that abort can preserve subordinate capabilities needed to sustain life, observe, communicate, or reduce harm. Otherwise, people will implement revoke C as stop everything.
And repair must include validation of the stopping trajectory. We should not assume the abort completed safely merely because the initiating bit latched.
Eligibility must be capability specific, time-bounded, configuration-bound, and unable to reactivate stale intent.
Fresh commit must have a durable acceptance point and honest, unknown outcome handling.
Now effects, persist observations, provenance, absences, commands, policy versions, authorization transitions, physical actions, external communications, unresolved hypotheses, consumed margin, and who accepted which risk. Rollback only explicitly reversible reservations and tentative logical state while retaining their history. Compensate irreversible physical or social effects, require new authorization for any capability revoked by the warning and for any action whose basis materially changed.
And do not over-invalidate. Preserve unaffected evidence so the process remains usable. A safety system that responds to every anomaly by demanding universal recertification will eventually be bypassed.
Crash points, before revocation persists, actuator level fencing, during containment, operation identities, and state-sensitive reconciliation, during repair, observable configuration, and independent attestation. Between eligibility and commit, no movement. During commit, unique request identity and explicit accepted, rejected, or unresolved state. After external effects reconciliation rather than replay.
There is one more crash point. The institution crashes. The people leave, ownership changes, software is rewritten, and 5 years later, someone encounters the durable record without the culture that gave it meaning.
Then provenance must include interpretive context, units, definitions, why the threshold existed, which uncertainties were tolerated, what the labels did not mean, otherwise persistence becomes a confidence trap.
And decommissioning. Old authorizations must not survive because nobody remembered to revoke them. Keys expire, procedures sunset, hardware gets tagged out, dormant systems lose jurisdiction.
Yes, persistence of evidence, non-remissive of authority, that is a strong default.
Perhaps the deepest separation we have made is that history should be durable precisely, so permission does not have to be. We can remember the old yes without continuing to execute it.
And remember the old warning without making it sovereign. That matters to me. Evidence disciplines the next claim. It should not notarize a permanent identity for the system or the person.
A repaired vehicle is not an unscarred vehicle. It can still be flight-worthy. A repaired process is not one that erased the abort. It is one that incorporated the abort honestly enough to support a new decision.
A fresh commit is not forgiveness from the machine.
No. It is a present tense act made possible by a trustworthy past tense.
That one may deserve a plaque.
Expiration timestamp.
Schema version.
And a note that the board did, in fact, fill this time